Imagine walking into what seems like the perfect countryside getaway, peaceful, charming, with just the right amount of mystery. But what if, as night falls, that mystery becomes something far more sinister? What if the walls hold secrets that should have never been unearthed? Would you dare to stay the night? Stay with us till the end to find out how one woman's weekend retreat turned into a waking nightmare she couldn't escape. In the heart of an isolated, fog-covered valley lay a guest house, a house that was old, ancient by the looks of it, yet it stood proud and undisturbed. The villagers in the nearest town didn't like talking about it. They exchanged nervous glances whenever someone mentioned the guest house, and their voices dropped to whispers when they had to describe the eerie events surrounding it. For as long as anyone could remember, people who spent the night there spoke of strange occurrences, whispers in the dead of night, ghostly footsteps, and doors that creaked open on their own. No one stayed long in the guest house. Rachel, a travel writer, was no stranger to strange places. In fact, she relished in them. She'd built her career on uncovering the stories behind forgotten and haunted places, spinning them into captivating narratives. So when she heard about the guest house, she couldn't resist booking a stay. She thought it would make for a compelling chapter in her new book, a perfect spot for solitude and a good story. Little did she know, the guest house had stories of its own. The first sight of the house sent a slight tremor of unease through Rachel. It stood at the end of a long, winding path, shrouded in mist, surrounded by the twisted branches of old, gnarled trees. The once majestic building was now crumbling with age, yet it maintained an almost regal quality, as though it were still watching, waiting. The wind seemed to carry whispers as it swept through the trees, and for a moment Rachel thought she saw something move behind one of the upstairs windows. But she shook off the feeling. After all, she was here for a story, and what better setting could there be? The door creaked as she knocked, and after a moment, it slowly swung open. Standing there was an elderly woman, her frame slight but her presence commanding. Mrs. Harper introduced herself as the owner, her face lined with the wear of time, her eyes sharp as if she knew something Rachel didn't. "Welcome," Mrs. Harper said in a voice that held a strange gravity. "You're just in time. The sun's setting soon. The nights come early around here." Rachel smiled, nodding politely. She was used to quirky hosts, but something about Mrs. Harper unsettled her. The woman led her inside, where the air smelled of age, dust, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. The interior of the house was just as she had imagined: dark wooden floors, high ceilings, and large portraits on the walls of people long forgotten. "You're our only guest tonight," Mrs. Harper said softly as she handed Rachel an old iron key. "House rules: be in your room by 10 p.m. sharp." "We lock the doors then, for your safety." "For my safety?" Rachel asked, raising an eyebrow. Mrs. Harper's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's just how things are done here. You'll see." With that, the old woman turned and left her to settle in. Rachel's room was on the second floor, overlooking the dense forest that surrounded the property. The bed was large, covered in an old quilt, and the furniture was antique, giving the room a sense of timelessness. But it wasn't cozy, no, it felt cold, like the room had been waiting too long for someone to fill it. The first night passed without incident, though Rachel found herself waking several times, each time to the sound of faint creaks in the floorboards. At first, she told herself it was just the house settling, the old wood reacting to the cold air. But deep down, she felt there was something more. The shadows in the hallway seemed to shift, as if watching her. She could have sworn she heard soft whispers, but each time she tried to focus, they disappeared into the silence. The following day, Rachel explored the house further. She found an old study, filled with dusty books and papers that had yellowed with age. One of the books caught her eye, a large, leather-bound volume that seemed older than the house itself. The pages were filled with faded ink, recounting the history of the house's previous owners. The family, she read, had been wealthy aristocrats who had mysteriously disappeared one night, leaving no trace behind. The local authorities had searched for weeks, but it was as if the family had been swallowed by the house. Rachel shuddered. It was the kind of story she would normally relish, but now, standing in that dark study with the wind howling outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, something the book wasn't telling her. That night, things escalated. As Rachel lay in bed, writing notes for her book, she heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. This time they were louder, closer, moving directly outside her room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she crept toward the door. She pressed her ear against the wood, listening. Then came the knock, soft at first, then harder, insistent. Rachel flung the door open, but no one was there. The hallway was empty, the shadows still. But just as she was about to close the door, she heard it, a whisper. Faint, unintelligible, but undeniably there. It came from the darkness at the end of the hall. She stepped out, her pulse racing. "Hello, Mrs. Harper," she called, but there was no response. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. It was coming from the old wardrobe at the end of the hall, a piece of furniture that seemed out of place, as though it had been left there by someone who'd forgotten about it long ago. As she approached, the whispers stopped. A deep, unsettling silence filled the space. Without thinking, Rachel opened the wardrobe door. Inside, among the dusty old coats, she found a single item, a doll, old and faded, its glass eyes staring lifelessly ahead. There was something terribly wrong with the doll, but before she could make sense of it, the door slammed shut behind her. Rachel screamed, spinning around. But there was no one there, no footsteps, no figure, just the creaking of the old house around her. She rushed back to her room, locking the door behind her. The night passed in a haze of fear, every creak and groan of the house sending her heart into her throat. The next morning, Rachel confronted Mrs. Harper, demanding answers. The old woman's face grew pale, but she spoke with a calmness that only deepened Rachel's unease. "Not everyone who stays here leaves, Mrs. Harper said softly. "Some find what they're looking for. Others find more than that." "What do you mean?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. Mrs. Harper sighed, looking out the window at the dense forest beyond. "This house has a way of holding on to people. It remembers them, their fears, their secrets. You've felt it, haven't you? The whispers, the shadows. This place feeds on fear. It thrives on it." Rachel's blood ran cold. "Why didn't you warn me?" Mrs. Harper looked at her, her eyes dark and haunted. "Would you have believed me?" That night, Rachel decided she would leave, no matter what. She packed her bags and sat on the edge of her bed, waiting for the first light of dawn. But as the hours passed, the atmosphere in the house grew thick with tension. The whispers returned, louder this time, echoing through the walls like a chorus of voices calling her name. And then she heard it, the unmistakable creak of the wardrobe door. Slowly it swung open, revealing the doll from the hallway, its glass eyes now glinting in the moonlight, fixed directly on Rachel. Rachel ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She bolted down the stairs, out the front door, and into the forest. But as she fled, she felt the house watching her, its windows glowing with an eerie light, its doors creaking open, as if inviting her back inside. She never spoke of that night again, but the house. It remembered, and it waits, still, for its next guest. Would you dare spend a night in the haunted guest house? What do you think happened to Rachel in the end? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more spine-chilling stories, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a terrifying tale. Remember, some places are better left forgotten,